Okay, we are back with just our single video that we're having this particular week because this week is focused on peer review. So I am just going to, just to give you a little review of some things. So peer review, and then a little bit about revision. We're going to talk about revision in more detail next week. After you've turned in your paper, and you're really going to focus on revising it for your final portfolio. So that's going to be your final for this class. Is not a test. It's actually going to be a portfolio where you revise your research paper based on my notes. And then you also do the personal essay that I will give you as an outline next week. So we'll talk more about it next week, but this week we're going to talk a little bit about revision, just go over a few things beyond peer review that you can do to check on your papers before you turn it in. So just announcements, make sure that you finish peer review on the discussion board by Thursday. And so I'm recording this on Monday, so you should be turning in your rough drafts to the discussion board and to the D2L Dropbox by tonight, so Monday night. If it's past Monday and you're watching this and you have not turned it in, then make sure that you do that as soon as possible. Now, each one of these peer reviews is worth 5 points on your final grade. And so not turning that in is not going to turn out well for your final grade. But it also, part of that grade is commenting on at least 2 other students' papers by Thursday. So make sure that you do that. All that criteria there that's on the discussion board, pretty close to the same as what it has been for all the rest of the peer reviews. So make sure that you comment on at least 2 other people's papers. And like it says in there, make sure that you prioritize papers that maybe you don't have any comments yet, or only have a few, or have the fewest number, because it's kind of, I'll go through it sometimes and I see some people have 4 comments on their paper and then some people have 0. And so it's just like spread the love a little bit, help out everybody. Also, make sure that you use that peer review criteria to revise your own paper. A lot of times people will contact me and they'll go, I can't see my peer review. I don't know how to make any changes. Even if you can't see it, you should be able to still see what other people are commenting on your paper, but use that criteria and look over your paper as if you're looking over somebody else's paper. So imagine it's not your paper and look for all those things that are listed, the thesis statement in the correct format. Look for the citations, look for the organization, look to see if it's fitting all of the criteria for the assignment. Do all that on your own paper. It's, ultimately it's your paper. You can't rely on someone else just to make changes for you. You've got to do that focus for yourself as well. Also, as a reminder, the final draft of the researched argument is due this Friday, April the 23rd by 11:59. Those of you that turned it in early, I have graded some of them and I'm working on finishing that, so I should have them all finished either by later on today or before class tomorrow. So if you don't have comments or anything on it yet, you will be getting it very soon. All right, so just a really quick peer review, and this again is from your book 72 through 74, those pages. Just a reminder about the purpose. This is to give constructive criticism for the paper. So you're helping, again, we talked about what's construction. It's building something, building somebody up. So helping someone build their paper and make it better, make it sturdier, make it more habitable, used to help you revise your own draft. So use that same criteria, like I said, to help you revise your own draft. Look at your own draft too. Don't just rely on somebody else to do the revision for you. It's your paper, you revise it. Look at the overall ideas and organizations of the paper. So you're not necessarily looking at all the spelling and grammar and punctuation mistakes. Those things are important to correct, but that's not what the main point of the assignment is. It's not that you have a comma in every place that you're supposed to have a comma. It's that you have a well-constructed argument, that you've explained well, that you've analyzed sources, that you've done all these things to answer your research question, and everything is, the ideas are fully developed and they're organized well in your paper. And that's the most important part of this assignment. So that's the thing you should be focusing on when you're revising your own paper and when you're helping others revise their paper as well. Not just to criticize, not just to point out mistakes, and not just to kind of glance over and say, yeah, it looks fine, awesome, and then move along, because that's not helping anybody. So make sure that you're giving a balance of things that are good about the draft as well as things that you may still have questions about. And again, not just looking at spelling and grammar, you're looking for mostly that all the ideas are fleshed out the way they should be, organized the way they should be, and that, you know, the argument is really there and it's supported. This is just a reminder about revising versus editing. Think about revising is where you're looking at the big picture of things. So you're looking at whole sentences and words, you're moving whole paragraphs around, you're adding things, you're removing things that are needed and not needed. You know, if you've got an idea that's not completely fleshed out, you're adding sentences and words in there. Or maybe if you've got something that kind of goes off on a tangent a little bit, then perhaps you remove that. You're organizing things, you're moving words and sentences and paragraphs around, and you're trading words and sentences for others, so you're using substitution there. Versus editing is where you're looking at the little details. So you're looking at capitalization, which a lot of people, that's something you do need to look at, because I've seen a lot of issues with capitalization. Even words like United States, that you would think that you know, that's something you learned a long time ago to capitalize. I get papers that have United States and it's not once capitalized in there. Using subject-verb agreement, that's something that I've seen a little bit of issue with, so make sure that all your nouns and your verbs agree with each other. Looking at the punctuation and looking at the spelling. I'm getting papers that have the little red underline that shows that the word is misspelled and it's still not being corrected. So make sure that you're turning in a final draft. You're not just writing it, throwing it on the paper, and then turning it in, because that doesn't look like you're doing much effort. And that is not going to be rewarded in your grade if you're not, doesn't look like you're putting forth a whole lot of effort. So make sure that you're looking at all of those things as you're revising and you're editing. And speaking of revision and editing, this is just, like I said, I'm going to go over this more in detail next week, and I'm also going to introduce your final portfolio assignment next week. But just a couple things to look over as you are getting ready to turn in your paper. So looking at revision, looking at the content of your paper. So look at the flow of ideas throughout the entire paper and within each paragraph. Does it make sense? Does it flow from one thing to another, or does it seem like it's jumping all over the place? Check to see that your essay moves logically from introduction to the body paragraphs to the conclusion, and that each section reinforces your thesis. So everything should be pointing back to that thesis. Everything is supporting your argument. Your thesis statement, which is the answer to your research question, everything should be pointing back to that. So does everything move logically? Does it, again, is it jumping around all over the place? If you can't follow the train of thought, then maybe there's some reorganization that needs to happen there. Make sure every paragraph has a clear main idea, in other words, a clear topic sentence. And if it does not, revise the topic sentence of that paragraph so I can, as I'm reading, I know exactly what each paragraph is going to be about. And also, some of the early papers I've gotten have some long paragraphs in there that have several different topics in them. If you've got a paragraph that reaches more than a page, that's probably too long. And so look in there and see, hey, are there a few topics in here that maybe I can break this up a little bit, and then write those topic sentences so you can clearly see what the main idea of each paragraph is. And then check for overuse of quoted or paraphrased material. Look at your Turnitin score. Some of these are coming in really high, which means that there's a lot of paraphrased. I actually haven't seen very much paraphrased material. It's a lot of quoted material. But people, when you have a score that's really high in the Turnitin, that means that you're relying too heavily on the sources instead of your own words. I'm not here to read the sources. I'm here to read your argument. The sources are only there just to kind of support what you have to say, not to make the argument for you. So make sure that you're not relying on the quoted material to make your argument. It's just there to support your argument. Just a quick editing checklist. These are some common mistakes I see. Again, look at capitalization, especially names of people and places. Those are things that I'll see a lot of times that aren't capitalized. So make sure that everything that's a proper name or a proper place, proper name of anything, of people, places, Things like that need to be capitalized. Also, look at commonly misspelled words, especially words that, there's several different ways to do it, like two, and two, where, there, your, because when you're using Word or Google Docs or whatever, they are not going to underline this necessarily, because if it's spelled correctly, it's spelled correctly. However, if it's the wrong word, if you've got, when you're talking about possessive there, in other words, that somebody owns something, but you use this one which means over there, then that's not going to be underlined, but it's a misuse, so it's a mistake. So make sure that you're looking for all of those things. Another thing that I haven't really discussed yet, but in academic writing, you really should not be using contractions. So if you see, I've got there and I've got your right here, you should be writing out those entire words. So it should say they are or you are. And plus that gives you extra words too. So it's something to do. But so anytime you have a contraction in there, write it out. It's not how you speak. You speak in contractions, but this is not, you're not writing how you speak. This is academic writing. It should have a formal tone to it. It shouldn't sound like if you're just talking to your friend or whatever. Check for run-on sentences or sentence fragments. So I see a lot of what we call comma splices, where there is you'll have a complete sentence, comma, and then another complete sentence. And that's considered a run-on sentence, a comma splice. You can't just split up two complete sentences with just a comma. Now you can use a comma and a conjunction, so you can say comma and, comma but, something like that, depending on how the sentences go together. Or you can use a semicolon and semicolons are kind of confusing to use, but how you use them is that you put you have two complete sentences that are closely related to each other, then you could put a semicolon in between them. Combining sentences that make a complete thought, if you've got a sentence fragment. If you don't have a complete thought, if it doesn't have a subject and a verb in it, then it is not a complete sentence. That's considered a sentence fragment. Also, one thing I noticed, if you have a sentence that begins with the word which, it almost always, unless it's a question, even sometimes when it's a question, but if it starts with the word which, it's probably a fragment. So you can do like a Command F or a Control F and do a search through your whole paper and look for the word which. And if it's capitalized and it's the beginning of a sentence, you've probably got a sentence fragment there. And usually in those cases, you can just connect it to the sentence in front of it. You can put a comma and then lowercase that which, and then you've got then it's a complete sentence. Make sure you avoid questions, especially throughout your paper. It's best to just present the answer to the question. This is you presenting an argument. It's not you asking me questions. So I don't like to see a whole lot of question marks throughout. Maybe a couple in the intro when you're starting to talk about what you're talking about and you're presenting your topic. But if I start seeing a bunch of questions throughout your paper, it makes it seem like you're not sure about what you're talking about. So just present the answers to the questions. Don't ask me questions, because then it also seems like you're just trying to take up space. You're going to put a question, you're going to put an answer. You put a question, you put an answer. Just put the answers there. Be declarative. Like, give me statements about your topic. Make sure it doesn't sound like you're talking to a friend. Like I said, make sure you've got that formal academic tone. If you've got a sentence that starts with yes, comma, or no, comma, that usually sounds conversational. You could probably just start it after wherever the yes or the no is. Anytime the sentence starts kind of like that, it's usually going to be sort of informal, which is not going to fit this assignment. Make sure that you're not using words that are not words. A-L-O-T is not a word. A space L-O-T is a word. You are, your, like, don't write like it's a text message. And I'm, sometimes when I'm writing stuff on my phone, I have that problem because I'm so used to doing that on my phone. Shortening words and that kind of stuff. But this is not a phone writing assignment. This is, an actual academic assignment. Firstly is actually not a word. You can say first, second, third, but firstly, secondly, thirdly, those aren't words, so don't use that. Another, I've seen that one a few times. Another would be a word, another. Also, look out for who and that. When you're talking about a person, it's who, not that. So when you say a person who does something, not a person that does something. So just pay attention to that, the use of who and that. Also, I'm getting some papers with a lot of first and second person in there. And as I've told y'all a good number of times in class that first and second person is not something you put in academic writing. I don't need to see any of these words that I've got right here unless it's a direct quote, I don't need to see it. So I, me, my, mine, our, ours, we, us, I don't need to see any of that. You, your, and yours, especially you, your, and yours. But I've seen some papers where people are putting, I think that blah, blah, blah. I know you think it because you're writing it. Just take the I think and just state it like a fact. You know, when you say the we and the our, you are making assumptions about your audience. So you're saying everyone agrees with me or everyone's a part of this group when that may not be true. So make sure that you're just specific about who you're talking about. So instead of saying we, say Americans, say students, say young people. Make it third person. So they, them, you know, so or be like literally talk about the groups of people that you are speaking about. Be specific. If you're talking about, you know, try not to say people unless you mean literally every single person on the face of the earth. But be specific about like who is the we and the our you're talking about. Make sure that you remove all the like if you have something in all caps, you usually don't use that in academic writing. You would use italics a lot of times to bring emphasis to words instead of putting all caps. Exclamation points also are not something that go into academic writing, so make sure that you take that out. You don't need exclamation points in your academic writing. Also, we're going to look at a video about active and passive voice. I'm going to link for you. But make sure that you are writing an active voice. In other words, that means that the subject of the sentence should be doing the action, not receiving it. So the girl walks the dog, not the dog is walked by the girl. And that's where we talked about this toward the beginning of the semester, where you're using forms of the verb to be. So am, is, am, are, was, were, things like that. If you've got that in there, then that's passive voice, and you need to change it to active voice. Now, there's something called the Hemingway editor, and I would just Google that. It's an online tool that you can literally just copy and paste your paper into it, and it will show you where you've got passive voice, and it'll also show you where you've got too long sentences perhaps, or sentences that are hard to read, that kind of thing, and it helps you revise your paper. So that's definitely a tool I'm going to talk about and show in class this week, but that's something you should definitely use as you're writing, because it kind of helps you point out problem areas that you can revise for yourself. Also, like I said, make sure you've got that academic tone. It should sound like you're presenting a paper to a group of professors, not talking to your friends. So imagine you're reading this paper as a speech in front of all your professors. What kind of tone would you use? Make sure it's that formal academic tone. Very important things to check. These are definitely things that you should definitely pay attention to. Do you have a clear thesis in the claim because reasons format at the end of your intro paragraph? I am still, I've looked back at people have turned in their, their thesis statements and everything, and people aren't looking at the comments, and so they aren't revising their thesis statement to fit this, even though I've been talking about it since the beginning of the semester, and so their thesis statements are wrong. And that is a strict requirement for this particular assignment, and you will lose points if you do not have the thesis statement in the correct format at the end of your intro paragraph. The first place I look when I open your paper is the end of your intro paragraph, and I'm looking for that claim because reasons. So make sure you have that. Also, does every piece of outside information have a parenthetical or in-text citation? You must cite, and this is an example of what you shouldn't do. Yes, you should, so just start right here. You must cite even when you paraphrase, because even though they're your words, you're putting the information into your words, it's the source's information. You are not pointing out where you got the words from necessarily, you're pointing out where you got the information from. So any bit of outside information has to have a citation after it. If not, that is considered plagiarism, and that is an automatic fail on your paper. Please make sure that you go through and you check, and when you're looking at other people's papers during peer review, that you point out anywhere that they are missing citations. If there's any information that comes from another source, it has to have a citation. All right, assignments. Make sure that you finish your peer review on the discussion board by Thursday, and you turn in your final draft of the research argument by Friday at 11:59. And as always, if anyone has any questions, please feel free to ask. And as you're working, if you want to send me paragraphs and want me to look at it, I'm happy to do that. If you have questions about revision or comments on your paper, feel free to ask me about that as well. I am here to help you as much as I can. So good luck.